Hello and welcome to this video demonstration on one option to exclude Copilot in given scenarios. In this example, we're going to be covering DLP policies, data loss prevention policies, that prevents Copilot from surfacing and processing content inside of Copilot Chat. Normally, with Copilot Chat, Microsoft 365 Copilot can assist us in the retrieval of content where we've asked openly in a prompt or we've referenced documents directly. With this option to prevent this happening, it's all based on a sensitivity label, so you need to have at least one in place, and it doesn't require you to have any access control for the label. The settings apply to the label itself, so any documents with this label, you will see the exclusion happening. It will exclude Copilot from carrying out its retrieval process by relying on the indexing to locate the content found from the file or retrieving content from the file directly in Copilot Chat. So let's get started. In order to apply this DLP policy, we need to head over to the Purview Admin Center. Just to show this starting from scratch, I'm going to select the Information Protection blade where I'm going to go and create a new sensitivity label. As you may have seen on my other videos, it's generally best practice to have around 5 labels to differentiate your sensitivity from safe and public content all the way through to confidential and highly confidential material. That said though, you can have sub-labels. So for highly confidential here, I've made a few more under this banner, but with different purposes. But I'm going to create a new one here. And just to repeat myself from other videos, you can already use an existing label you have, but in this demonstration, I just wanted to start from the very beginning so you can see this working. I'm going to call this label Copilot DLP, a very obvious label name for this purpose I'm trying to portray. And I'll also be a little bit lazy here and just copy and paste this in the description and click next. And for the moment, I will just apply this label to files, so I will unselect the others for now. The next piece is very important. You don't need to apply access control. The DLP policy just works on having the label itself applied to documents. I usually skip past the automatic labeling section. However, for reference, if you do have the ability to detect information like PII, certain keywords, or trainable classifiers, a really great benefit to having an E5 license is this ability to automatically apply label application, which reduces a lot of burden on staff having to manually label everything. But I won't set up automatic labeling as this is just out of scope for demonstration, and I'll also skip the groups and site settings as well. But now I'm happy with everything, I will go and create that label, and I'll also publish it and add to an existing policy I have. So now that label has been created, I can now get on with creating the DLP policy with that label in mind. We can navigate over to data loss prevention now, and this is where we can create a new DLP policy. I'll select the policies blade, and this is where I already have some policies in place and set up for things like risky AI usage. There's some policy for Teams and Office 365. So just bear in mind, DLP can be for a lot of different usages, not just for Copilot, but still extremely important. When I go to create a new policy, the first thing it will ask is, do I want to use any templates relating to financial, health, or privacy type content? But in this example, I'm just going to click on custom, and this basically means I can start from scratch where I can decide what I'm going to put in my policy. I enter some basic information, and for this, I'm just going to be entering the name Exclude Copilot, and I'll paste that in the description to save time. It's also worth noting that admin units needs to be kept to the full directory, as the M365 Copilot location, it won't allow specific sets of users or groups like an admin unit to apply to the location, but we can still set the scope in the next section. Locations will be where we apply this DLP policy, so you will see places like Exchange Online, SharePoint for example, and down towards the bottom we now have a preview location called M365 Copilot, which is what we need. And when we select that, all the other locations get grayed out, which means we can't add in other locations for this DLP policy. This is specific to Copilot. But we can also specify the scope here for inclusion and exclusion of users and groups who apply to this policy, but I'm just going to leave this untouched for this demonstration. Now it's time to define what the DLP rules are, so we need to create some advanced configuration here. When I go to create a new rule, I have one agenda. I want to exclude Copilot based on that label I made before. After I set the rule name, I can add the condition, which will be where there is a sensitivity label detected, and you'll then see my Copilot DLP label that I made before. So the label is detected. Now what? What is this DLP policy going to do as an action? And this is where I need to set the action to prevent Copilot from processing content. There is a policy tip that comes through that explains that currently this DLP policy is supported for files in SharePoint and OneDrive that are being processed in a chat experience. And that's not supported for non-chat experiences, but I'll explain what this means when we see the user experience. So continuing this creation, I want to enable this policy straight away. So I go to submit, and now this DLP policy is in play. It will also give me some other related activities for me to look at inside of Purview, but for now, let's go and check this new policy out and the outcomes. As an end user, I'll start in Microsoft Word, where I've created a quick document on stop and search procedures for UK police. And you can see me saving this document and applying that label Copilot DLP to the document. In Copilot Chat, I could reference this document as I have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. And when asking Copilot to summarize, you can see the output is that it cannot do this for me. Copilot has been excluded from retrieving any content found in this document, which is great, this is what we want. And just to show this working in other areas, I've made a legislation agent and I've also referenced the document here. It's shut down. I even attempt to ask Copilot to find me any information based on stop and search, and it can't even find this document from the indexing because of this prevention. And finally, even if you didn't have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license and you just had the included Copilot Chat functionality, you are still allowed to upload files into Copilot Chat. So what I've done here is I've uploaded this labeled document. Copilot cannot process any content here either. So this effectively shows that inside of Copilot Chat, Copilot has been blocked from surfacing and processing any content found in this labeled document and any other documents with that label. What this effectively shows is that we are removing this content from being used by Copilot, either from being surfaced or processed in general, where no data is at risk of being sent to the large language model for processing. Now, this DLP policy is a great option, but I wanted to cover where there may be a gap in requirements. However, if what you've seen so far is exactly what you're after, especially with surfacing information, then this is simple to set up and implement. Now let's go back into the document I asked Copilot to summarize. When I click on the file, it will first open in the web app, and as you can see, the label is still applied, but I can use Copilot inside the body of the application. And this also applies to the desktop application as well. This is because the DLP policy is only currently supported for cloud files, which is being interacted with in the chat experience and not in the applications where I can still use Copilot to summarize or make changes to this document. But it's not the end of the world, as there are other videos addressing this element, so I'd highly recommend checking those out. For now though, this is the end of this video demonstration. I hope it's been really useful and provided you with some options here. Do check out the other videos made, and any questions you have, please do reach out to your Microsoft representative. For now though, thanks so much for watching and take care.